Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends where are you dialing in from. And welcome to this Asia Pacific Festival organized by World Green Building Council. So my name is Joy Guy. I'm the Asia Pacific Programs Head. I will be the host for today. So as you know, the Asia Pacific Network, we're running a 6-month long of the Asia Pacific Festival. We already finished the June, which talk about the climate action. We opened with a net zero solutions in 24 hours. And then we also has a deeper dive in the July when we talk about health and well-being. And now we're turning our focus to this August, which is talk about resources and circularity. So just to make sure you are coming into the right one, today we have really a lot of experts to come in and share with you how do they interpret resources and circularity in their field of experts. So again, since I'm Joy, coming into the joy of this session, let's start this with a little joke about resource and circularity. I was searching around. Okay, so let's start with a joke about resource and circularity. Okay, so if you hear me repeating other people's joke, it's because I'm circulating other people's joke. All right, I see my panels are already laughing. I hope this gives you a light and joyful touch in the beginning. I'm sure our panels will have a lot of fun things to share with you. So let's begin with today's festival, like resources and circularity. So the first speaker we have lined up today is Katrina, and she is our Director of Strategy and Development from the World Green Building Council. So Katrina is going through a very important moment in her life. So unfortunately, she couldn't join us online, and she has recorded the video to share with us what resource and circularity and also our circularity program is about. So if you know Katrina in person, please send her a personal note to welcome and congrats her new stage of life. Yeah, but at the meantime, let's hear from Katrina.
Hello, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to be here today to contribute an opening presentation on the World Green Building Council's Circularity Accelerator program as part of the Asia Pacific Festival, our Resources and Circularity Month, taking place in August 2022. My name is Katrina Brady. I'm Director of Strategy and Development at the World Green Building Council, based in London in the United Kingdom, and thank you so much for being with us today. In my presentation today, I'm going to give an overview of the work of World GBC's Circularity Accelerator global programme, beginning with a few words on strategy. As I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the World Green Building Council Global Network represents an action network of 70 green building councils around the world, which we also have divided up into 5 regional networks. Our global membership represents a collective group of organisations who are members of the Green Building Councils, representing around 36,000 organisations around the world dedicated to sustainability in the built environment. Our strategy is simple. We have 3 thematic impact areas, which are aligned to the targets and indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals. We have a global programme that speaks to each one of these strategic impact areas. There is the Advancing Net Zero programme, which speaks to climate action, Better Places for People, which speaks to health and well-being. And today we are, of course, focusing on resource efficiency in the circular economy, which we are hosting in the Circularity Accelerator global programme, which launched only a few months ago. The North Star, or guiding goal for the movement that we have set for our work on resources and circularity, is specifically aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals around SDG 8, 12, and 15, predominantly around SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production. Our overall vision is that we're aspiring to create a built environment that facilitates the regeneration of resources in natural systems, whilst providing socioeconomic benefit through a circular economy. By 2030, we have a sub-target within that. We're looking to be achieving zero waste to landfill targets on an international scale and working towards a built environment with net zero whole life resource depletion, and that's part of our 2050 target as well. And these global goals are what we are aspiring to target through the work of our global membership and the programme that we have set up to aid them. Our internal strategy is a little more specific, and I won't go through all the details on this here, but what you can see down the left-hand side of my screen are the 7 ways in which we're working with the green building councils around the world to make that change and to work towards the targets of our North Star goals. We collaborate with leading organisations around the world. We want to ensure alignment and cohesion with other work that's happening in the circular economy space. We are very strong in our global advocacy as well as regional policy and regulation guidance, supporting the policies that require efficient use of resources in the circular economy. Additionally, we endorse the role of rating tools and certifications on a national and international level. Communication and education of the wider industry and our members is a key priority for us and something we will support the Green Building Councils with doing so on a national level. And innovation and investments, particularly the way we can mobilise green finance to implement a circular economy, are 2 other areas as well we're committed to exploring through the strategy of this work. So let me begin by sharing a little bit of work that's already happened in this space. First of all, there is fantastic leadership within the World Green Building Council network already on the circular economy, on regeneration of nature, nature-based solutions, biodiversity, and I would encourage you to reach out to your local Green Building Council to find out what they are doing at a national or regional level. On screen are just a few examples from some of the many green building councils who have work in this space, all of which is publicly available. And for example, you can see the Green Building of Australia's Insights into Circular Economy training programme in the bottom left of the screen. This slide is more specific to a European audience, but I do think it's interesting to share in terms of its relevance on the international political agenda that the World Green Building Council team has taken a very active role in advocacy as part of the EU Commission's platform on sustainable finance. One of our colleagues, our Director of Europe, Stephen Richardson, was leading the team in the EU taxonomy consultation who were coming up with the criteria for the circular economy section of the EU taxonomy, and subsequently we're also developing a policy whole life carbon roadmap through the Building Life programme. All of this information is available on the World Green Building Council website, and I think it's particularly been relevant for us as global programme participants to be able to see the leadership and action that's happening in some regions of the world and explore the ways in which it can be scaled and replicated in other geographies. We have also been undertaking internal market research, and this slide you can see on screen was from actually an internal session that we ran last year around the barriers for the circular economy, where you will see that lack of financial incentives came out as the biggest barrier for achieving a circular economy in the built environment with the focus group that we were discussing. The numbers do add up to higher than 100. That's because people were able to pick more than one option each, but this certainly highlighted the wide range of challenges across the system that we're going to have to face to implement a circular economy, whether that's on a local level, regional, national, or ultimately global. So that takes me to what we are doing this year and how we would love to invite you to get involved and participate alongside us in this work as we aspire to create a more circular built environment. Our Circularity Accelerator Global Programme launched in May of this year, and you can find more information about that on the Circularity Accelerator webpage that you can hopefully see on my screen. We are developing a range of branding and communication asset materials, which will also be on the website, that are free and available for people and organizations to use. So please do feel free to make use of those materials as they're launched throughout this year. It's also my pleasure to be able to introduce the Global Steering Committee and partners of the programme. We are delighted to work with close to 20 green building councils currently, and it's a very international range from the Asia Pacific network. We have, for example, the Green Building Council of Australia, Hong Kong GBC, New Zealand, Singapore, and I'm sure we will be welcoming many more in due course. And you can also see the expert partners, the industry leaders who we have the pleasure of working with, from Brightwork Sustainability, Ramble, Foster & Partners, VinZero, CBRE and WSP, many of whom you will be hearing from during this festival. Now, a deliverable that I'm excited to share some information about is our proposed market research report. And this is going to be a commentary and an analysis of the state of the work that the real estate sector has been doing globally in terms of implementing a circular economy. We want to be able to help overcome some of the confusion and the misalignment in this sector and with the various terms and the terminology around the circular economy. So through this publication, we're going to be amalgamating the work of global leaders, both the green building councils around the world, as well as our partners, but also other NGOs in this space who are doing fantastic work, including the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the World Resources Institute, the World Economic Forum. There's many, many more. And we want to make sure that we are publishing in one place a resource list that allows people to understand the different calls, the different scopes, definitions that all of these organizations are publishing around the circular economy, so that we can understand where there are these areas of alignment and where we need to do further work. We're specifically going to focus on sustainable construction materials, everything from how we can make heavy materials such as steel more efficient, lower the embodied carbon of that, increase the circularity potential, through to thinking about things like bio-based materials and how we can create a market for secondary materials. The second big section will be on design and retrofit, how we can ensure our buildings are designed for disassembly, how we can promote adaptability, how we can retrofit buildings to become more circular, and what are the requirements, the design considerations that we need for our new and existing buildings to be able to take our existing building stock and our cities of the future and ensure they can contribute to a circular built environment. The third section will be about the regeneration of nature, and this topic's incredibly exciting. The restoration of natural systems was part of the language in our North Star goal that I presented earlier. And here we will be showing what's happening across our global network and the wider world in terms of nature-based solutions, again, the use of bio-based materials, in terms of restoration of ecosystem services and other natural systems, and how we can help to bring the green back into the urban environment as part of our circularity efforts. So that report we are aiming to launch at the end of this year, so please do keep an eye on our social media channels and on our website for further updates on that. into next year, we will initiate a network consultation where we will engage the wider industry in the development of a framework of principles that builds on our research report that will speak not only to the global advocacy movement, but also to local markets, aligning what we have in terms of leadership already at national and regional scale. And we are also committed to providing training and communication materials for green building councils around the world. So please do get in touch and we will be working with the green building councils as well to ensure that we're making these high quality materials available to be disseminated across the network. You can also reach out to any of our partners at any time who are all experts in this space, as you will hear in the follow-up presentations throughout this festival, and they will certainly be happy to share more about the work that they're doing on this topic as well. And so with that, it's my pleasure now to hand over to the following speakers, follow-on speakers during today's session. And thank you very much for having me today. If you have any specific questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or any of the team directly, and we will look forward to working with you and being in touch again in the future. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the festival celebrations.
All right, thank you, Katrina. So again, if your organization or your Green Building Council is more interested in the resource and circularity work, and please reach out to any of us or any of the speakers. And then this is really the area that we have a lot more to develop together. So we're looking forward to form more partnership with you and your company. So next, we will have Ms. Susan Tan. She's from the AGC Asia Pacific. AGC has been with us as a regional partner for, this is the 6 years. So AGC is also the leading it's also the market leader in resource and circularity as well. So we will hear from Susan, also together with Singapore Green Building Council, who is also going to share about their program about resource and circularity. So we'll bring them back here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan from AGC Asia Pacific Private Limited Cross-Functional Project Division. It is my pleasure to represent AGC to speak to you today on the effort AGC has taken to achieve the realization of a sustainable global environment. Without further ado, let us get started. Sustainability is in the forefront and at the focus of corporate strategy worldwide. In AGC, environment is one of the 4 shared values, others being innovation and operational excellence, diversity, and integrity. Our mission is to develop advanced materials and solutions to improve people's life globally. Taking a brief walk through our history, since 1907 till date, AGC have provided innovative materials and solutions in line with the changes of time. We have since evolved from Asahi Glass Company, which started out as a flat glass business, to AGC Group, where we have since expanded our businesses to include electronics, chemicals, ceramic, and many more. To realize our Vision 2030, AGC Group aims to create a sustainable economic and social value by transforming our business portfolio. In addition to meet our financial targets, we also want to achieve a balance between business growth and realization of a sustainable society. We will strive to achieve the sustainability mission in all our business activities and contribute to the resolution of these 5 key social issues. The AGC Group aims to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2050 and pledge to reduce our total CO2 emission through energy saving and energy creating products. Specifically, a 30% reduction in greenhouse gases emission by 2030 and a 50% reduction in greenhouse gases emissions per unit of sales to realize a sustainable global environment. Let's us take a look at what are the steps we have taken thus far to achieve this target. We are committed to prioritizing environmental impact and sustainability in the manufacturing of our products. AGC became the first European glassmaker to obtain Cradle-to-Cradle certification for its float glass and Menatron coated glass in 2010. Since then, we have had 8 products ranges that are Cradle-to-Cradle accredited and have successfully renewed and maintained the relevant certification as well, ensuring our relevance to the ever-changing standards. Notwithstanding that, AGC Glass Europe was also awarded the Silver certification in the Water Stewardship category of the Cradle-to-Cradle Certified Program in 2015. The depletion of natural resources is a critical issue at hand, and it is essential that corporations are doing their best to reduce the consumption of natural resources. And here at AGC, we reduce our utilization of natural resources as far as is technically possible. In the glass manufacturing process, we use glass cullets as a substitute for raw materials such as silica sand and refuse glass from urban center for reuse as raw material as much as possible. The ratio of recycled material present in products as indicated in compliance to the ISO 14021 standard. The AGC Group has successfully reduced 53% more CO2 emission in the year 2020 as compared to 2019 through the usage of glass cullet. In response to the need to balance realizing low global warming potential whilst maintaining the energy conservation performance of refrigerants for air conditioners, AGC has created ammonia products that contribute to the environment. Ammonia. This is a next generation fluorinated, non-flammable refrigerant and non-flammable solvent with low environmental impact while keeping high performance effect. Ammonia series received the Minister of the Environment Award at the Japan Association for Chemical Innovation Green and Sustainable Chemistry Awards in 2020. Uniporus, on the other hand, is a biological filter that is made from sea urchin shells. 85% of shells go to waste yearly due to the challenges and time required during processes. We aim to resolve this social issue with the cooperation from the Fisheries Research Department of the Hokkaido Research Organization. Uniporus was recognized for its high level of recyclability as a Hokkaido certified recycled product in 2019. In a bid to reduce freshwater consumption, the AGC Group is promoting wastewater recycling alongside a reduction in clean water usage and wastewater through water filtration. As part of our efforts to prevent water pollution, we have established wastewater control targets that are tailored to the characteristics of each site. These are the result of our efforts to utilize water resources more efficiently. 85% of water used for cleaning and cooling in production processes are seawater that are used for indirect cooling. The amount of fresh water recycled or cascaded in the production process is equivalent to approximately 16 times the amount of fresh water used. In summary, as part of AGC commitment to creating a sustainable future, we have outlined the fundamental approach as follows. To establish a long-term goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050, promote zero landfill, and continue steady progress to reduce the amount of waste generated. Expand the promotion of renewable energy at business sites of group companies. Proactively promote energy conservation in manufacturing processes. Introduce cogeneration system to maximize the use of energy. And lastly, provide products and solutions that contribute to energy savings and generation, contributing to the mitigation of climate change as an overall. And that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for your interest and attention. We hope it was insightful. If everyone has any questions, please feel free to contact me and I will do my best to assist.
Right, thank you. So next, we will also hear from Singapore Green Building Council about their program rollout regarding resource and circularity. So Elvin will share with us about these details. So we will bring the video up.
Good day, everyone. This is Elvin from the Singapore Green Building Council. I would like to thank the World GBC Asia Pacific Network for putting together this platform for Resources and Circularity webinar. I would also like to thank AGC for graciously inviting SGBC to share with you today. So I'll be talking about circularity and resources and highlighting a couple of case studies to show the perspectives from Singapore. So over here, let's have the table of contents. I'll be talking a little bit about circular economy while we do this, before I highlight new water, demolition protocol, and recycled concrete aggregates as Singapore case studies, before talking a little bit about the resources and environmental product declarations. So let's kick off with the circularity aspect. Circularity is essentially addressing the shift from a linear economy model to a circular economy model. In a linear economy, resources are used in a straight line from extraction from Earth's raw materials and move on to the in-use phase before reaching the end point of that straight line as a disposal of waste goods and materials. In this model, resources are extracted and designed for single-use life cycles, right? And value is created by producing and selling as many quantities as possible. In comparison, the circular economy changes the way value is perceived. The focus shifts towards value retention and material longevity across multiple life cycles. Waste materials are designed to be reintroduced to the manufacturing process, and this closes the cycle of raw materials. So if we look at that image on the right, I like it because it is more representative of what we see in reality. Some parts of waste are recycled back into the loop, but we do need to address and acknowledge that there is some level of waste that exits the loop. There is some level of raw materials that has to enter the loop. So the question is, how do we maximize the recycling component while minimizing the waste and minimizing the amount of fresh resources entering the loop? And that really is what circular economy is all about, right? The purposes are to address scarcity of resources, balancing out too much demand for too little supply. It is to use resources more efficiently, more effectively, and to reduce waste and to reduce environmental impacts. So now that we've talked about circular economy, let's move on to the Singapore case studies. The first one is Newater, just to bridge it a little bit. So Newater is actually the third of Singapore's national taps, the 4 sources of water that we have. Newater was launched in 2003 to the public, and it is a concept whereby used water from households and industries are reclaimed, and they go through a purification process before reintroduction to our water supply. So the purification process is a 3-step approach involving microfiltration, reverse osmosis, and then the ultraviolet disinfection. Now, the Newater that is resultant of this process is actually used in industrial estates, commercial buildings mainly. In times of dry periods, this can also bolster our local catchment water during dry periods as to supply as part of our potable water. Currently, Newater supplies up to 40% of our national water demands, as compared to, for example, desalinated water, which is 25%, or imported water, 50%. So you can see that we are trying to ramp up the capabilities in Newater by 2060 to become more self-sufficient as our water agreement with Malaysia ends in 2061. So it is a national strategic item that also encompasses the circular economy model of reintroducing used water back into the water loop. The next case study, more for the building industry now, is on recycled concrete aggregates. So recycled concrete aggregates are alternative materials to the raw aggregates or more raw concrete fines that is used in cementitious products or concrete mixtures. But before we jump to recycled concrete aggregates, we first need to understand a little bit about the Demolition Protocol. So the Demolition Protocol is captured in the Singapore Standards, SS 557 2010 edition, Code of Practice for Demolition. This actually has been in use under a different name since 2002. But the key 3 items here are 1, the pre-demolition audit, 2, the sequential demolition, and 3, the site waste management. So these are very important that help us to. These are very important items under our demolition protocol. So the demolition audit is when a building is identified for demolition. We first have to do a stock taking and inventory of the materials that are captured in that building. We identify what is reusable, what is recoverable, what has been contaminated, what has to be disposed of. So we run through the whole list of different building product categories such as pipes, wiring, concrete, and bricks to sort and take note of what can be recycled. The next step then is the sequential demolition. So in this stage, during the act of demolition itself, the building material are carefully dismantled, one product category at a time. So these are salvaged for reuse and recycling. And we also take the time to ensure that the materials that are not contaminated are marked for reuse and recycling. To aid all this is the site waste management, where there must be a plan to do the on-site temporary storage. And this will allow the appropriate sorting and transportation of materials, be it for disposal or transport to the appropriate facilities for reuse and recycling. So with this in place, we can then understand how recycled concrete aggregates come about. Demolition concrete debris, they are then taken back and broken down further with machines such as excavator and drawbreaker. These are then segregated into concrete aggregates, recycled concrete aggregates, and recycled concrete fines. These are then used in the production of various concrete and cementitious products, such as roads and non-structural concrete. So immediately there is a very valid application of recycled concrete aggregates. But let's take that one step further and talk about this Semwall Eco-Green building. Okay, Semwall is a builder and contractor They are also part of SGBC members, and they initiated a research project that collaborates with public agencies and institutes of higher learning to study and investigate more about recycled concrete, aggregate concrete. So the study found that when you compare traditional concrete versus concrete containing RCA, there's actually an insignificant difference to the tool. There is also the structural monitoring results that shows that deformations were within theoretical deformations. And the study concluded that RCA concrete can be designed for structural application. And this is where the birth of the Semwall Eco Green Building comes about. For all the concrete components of this building, they were actually made with RCA concrete, and not your traditional concrete. Even more so, the RCA concrete is actually found to be up to 100% RCA rather than fresh raw material aggregates. So I hope those two case studies have painted a picture of circularity in application in Singapore. Let me quickly move to the resources and environmental product declarations part. Why this becomes important is that we have to acknowledge that not all materials can shift so quickly into a circular economy model. So the key question becomes, how can we improve materials that are still trapped in the linear economy model? Compound onto that, carbon emissions of buildings. Buildings are known to account for 39% of global carbon emissions. In operational carbon, we know that there is time to improve it due to advances in technology, due to shifts to renewable sources of energy. But there is not enough activities or initiatives on the upfront carbon aspect. And unlike operational carbon, the upfront carbon or embodied carbon performance cannot be improved over time. It is simply locked in upon building completion. So this is where environmental product declarations can fill the gap. They are like healthy food labels that report on the sustainability impact of products. So in comparison against healthy food labels that talk about sugar, amount of fats or protein, environmental product declarations also have a series of environmental performance indicators. If you take a look at the image on the right, you see that I've singled out the GWP. GWP stands for global warming potential, and it tells us how much embodied carbon there is in this product based on its life cycle stages. So this is measured in kg CO2e per unit of product, and this is like the currency that we can compare products against one another. So if you have two, for example, carpet products, you can use the GWP or the kgCO2e amount to compare which product of the two carpets have a lower carbon emission. So you can see the application of this is an enabler for suppliers to review and improve their products and processes to lower the embodied carbon of their products. It's also an enabler for project teams, building project teams, to make a selection of products that are lower in embodied carbon. So this will then help to decarbonize our built environment, especially for the embodied carbon front. It's a very short one. I could go in more detail, but I don't think we have the time for it. I will leave you with a very picturesque image of another angle, a different angle of our CBD area, and wish you all a good day. I hope you enjoy this picture. For those who have not come to Singapore, here is what we have in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, we really welcome you to come to Singapore. This is where the Garden City is, and also we just celebrate our National Day. So yeah, welcome to Singapore. So thank you for AGC and also SGBC to share about their program. So moving forward, we will see like resource and circularity give us this opportunity to really bring a lot of different resources together. Compared with the climate action, I can see that resource and circularity seems more diverse, but it's also an opportunity for us to connect the dots and forming a big picture. So coming to this connecting the dots and forming a big picture, I'm delighted to introduce this most resourceful partner of World Green Building Council. I don't think there's a second one going to compete this. She is no other than Miss Esther. So she is really very resourceful to bring all the happenings around the region, even around the world, and circular everything back to this core vision about what we wanted to achieve together. And then she's definitely our best friend in the Asia Pacific, also World Green Building Council as well. Hi, Esther.
Hello everyone, and thank you for having me. And I hope I have already caught up the slides. I don't know whether you can see it.
Right, I'll bring it up. Yeah. So, how was your holiday? You just came back from holiday.
I just came back last night, and well, a lot of new inspiration when you are, soaked in nature. You really appreciate the beauty of it, and then it was very sad to see all the news, in the beautiful New Zealand that the wildfires are causing so much damage in EU and all. And I think we do need to step up. And I think I will share just support the previous speakers on how we really apply to a business and as a developer, as a landlord as well. So I think when we talk about net zero, it's not just about energy, it's also about circularity, which is very key, to decarbonizing the built environment. And well, once again, thank you for having me to share the CDL business case. And I think a lot of sustainability or green building community already read the news about the so-called Earth Overshoot Day. And that day is on July 28th, last month. And this is actually the earliest Earth Overshoot Day in the past 50 years. And what exactly is this Overshoot Day? It's like, imagine your bank account. You overdraft your account balance. You are using whatever it is overdrafting, the bank can afford to give you, until a day will not tell you which day they will stop giving you the resources and the money that you need. So similarly, for our planet, there is a limit. So this is actually telling you that, reminding the world that the Earth Overshoot Day is a tipping point, that when the people have used up the ecosystem can't actually provide for us in a year. And the sad thing is, during COVID, we actually have much later so-called Overshoot Day. But once we open up, we are getting it even earlier than in the past few decades. So what should we do now is to prevent overdraft. OD continues to overdrafting the facility, the resources, because if we continue to do this way, we are going to take 1.7 Earth to provide what the world's population is demanding from our planet. So this is something quite scary. And why are we talking about circular economy? And if you can look at this particular slide, that you can see that whenever we talk about net zero, the focus is always on how do we reduce energy, reduce carbon footprint. But even we are successful in that area, we can only reduce 55%. What is needed to achieve net zero. So now what, experts actually, the data show that the other 45% actually can be, filled by the production, the product strategy, through circular economy, practices and measure. There's this huge gap though. Currently, there's only less than 9% of over 100 billion tons of materials entering the global economy. So there is a gap of 91% that we need to fill the gap, and it will take the whole value chain from the designer to architect to engineer to contractor, main contractor, supplier, and of course developer, builders, and everyone, and building management to actually fill this gap. And not just within one country, but it has to be the whole world doing it. And just to give you an example, that there are 4 major building materials. Just now, Alvin talked about building materials, and there are 4 key materials that we definitely need for our building. Steels, cement, aluminium, and chemicals. So, but they are actually, responsible for a very substantial, over 65% of carbon emission. So now the question is, how could we reduce this, which is very important? If we do not do that, there will be no hope for us to to talk about net zero. And so the global driver is very clear. So now let me just zoom into what Singapore's, and the industry is doing. And of course, our SG Singapore Green Plan 2030, we have actually pledged to net zero by or around 2050. And you can see the 5 pillars of this green plan. And you can see that sustainable living also look at the way we live, work, and play. And most importantly, how do we reduce waste and the consumption through, engaging every citizen? We can't do this alone, not government alone, not one single, NGO or private sector can do it. We need the whole, ecosystem to transition to a low carbon and sustainable future. And we heard a lot about energy reset. And of course, under the Green Plan and also our Green Building Master Plan by BCA, the Building and Construction Authority, has already committed and to 80-80-80 goal. That means we have to green 80% of all our buildings in Singapore by 2030. And 80% of all our new building by gross floor area has to be super low energy, not just Green Mark certified, but super low energy, and achieve 80% of improvement in energy efficiency for best in class, green buildings by 2030. And we are very glad that we just announced that we have achieved, our redevelopment building of Fuji Xerox. We call it 80 Anson. It's a mixed development, has already achieved this super low energy. And to tell the truth, with new technology, new way of doing, design and all, it is possible. But it will really take the commitment and the, combined willpowers to do so. So to just give you an example here, that under the Green Mark, GM is actually the BCA Green Mark, the new framework actually outlines 6 sectors, 6 sessions of action, including energy efficiency, intelligence, health and well-being, and of course, whole life, carbon approach. Maintainability means and facility building maintenance is very important. And last but not least is resilience. So under the Green Mark 2021, policy, we have to adopt the whole life cycle, and that it actually, the Green Mark will assess a building's whole life carbon performance and impact, and look at sustainable construction, product and finishes, and how do we conserve energy in the way we build and we design, and also we construct and manage our property. Tenants' engagement is very important. We are glad to have actually successfully implemented 100% green lease since 2017. And we need greater commitment to help us, whether you are the developer or the landlord or the building users. Everyone have to come on board to move the needles. And of course, under the resilience session of Green Mark 2021, we have to achieve the circularity for buildings, whether it is new or existing building. We have to, adopt the dedicated recycling facility and receptacles for e-waste and packaging waste, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about Singapore's main waste stream. And we also look at food waste as well as adopt waste audits and engagement. And very importantly, building materials, which is the scope 3 under the carbon footprint, the scope 3 embodied carbon. Green procurement of environmentally sustainable products and materials are very, very important. And anyone in the real estate, value chain, it is critical for us to all join the actions together and to help the building sector to design, procure, construct, and maintain our building in a sustainable and low carbon, manner. And of course, this is some of the examples that we want to to show that it is doable. And we all talk about the high impact already just now. And then, of course, let me refresh it. It's like it is close to 50% of global energy-related CO2 emission is contributed by building and construction activities. Approximately 2/3 of our global building area exists today, will exist in 2040. Can you imagine that? And by 2060, global building floor area is expected to double. And if today we say we're already overdrafting our, the so-called carbon budget, can you imagine if the floor area double by 2060? What will the world become? So there is really an urgency for the real estate sector, to align with global goals and accelerate our action by adopting a life cycle approach. How can we do it? We can't do it alone. We have to collaborate, innovate, and apply technology that is effective. But we also need to look at setting goals and measuring. Without tracking, without measuring, you can't manage. So that's why we adopted the global goals set out by World Green Building Council. That is to reduce at least 40% of embodied carbon emission by 2030. So CDL's goals is actually to reduce by 41% by 2030. And this is actually aligned with our science-based target initiative validated to 1.5 degree, scenario. And all these are joining the dots together. If you want to achieve 1.5 degree, keep the global warming within 1.5 degree, you have to set more ambitious target. So February 2021, we have set the net zero target, and at Glasgow last year, we actually committed to support World GBC's whole life carbon cycle. And the timeline we are looking at also 2050, we have to look at net zero embodied carbon for new and also existing building, renovation, retrofitting, etc. And operational building carbon footprint is also a very important aspect, which actually account for almost 30% of global greenhouse gas emission. So as a landlord, we need to look at how we can retrofit and also, to maintain, a high level of energy efficiency and resource efficiency as well. So no point to set the target, but don't provide any guidance. So this is a so-called 3S green building framework and providing guidance for higher operational efficiency and also low carbon and cost-effective building materials and livable and healthy environment. How can we help to engage the whole ecosystem of stakeholders to achieve super low carbon performance, to achieve smart building and also sustainable building? And if you can see that under sustainable building, waste minimization and circularity is a key criterion as well. So for CDL, we are very glad to have started our so-called, sustainability journey as far back as 1995. And of course, at that time, our focus is really look at how do we conserve. But today, just conserving mitigation is not important. We need to look at regeneration. We look at circularity. We look at how do we integrate, under our value creation business model to transition to a low carbon emission. We have 4 pillars. The 4I, that is to integrate, into everything ESG into our business operations and governance structure, engaging both internal and external stakeholders as well. The second I is innovation. Adaptation is key. Mitigation will not help to move the needle towards net zero. Investment is putting money where your mouth is. Apart from investing impact, innovation, we also tap onto the fast-growing ESG funds and sustainable finance to help us accelerate climate action and green building innovation and performance. And last but not least, the last I is impact. Everything we do have positive or negative impact, and we must measure. What get measured get managed, and we have to look at long-term value for business, people, and planet. And we need to report it as well, because investors, stakeholders want to know your performance. And if you can look at our left-hand side here, this value creation model, we started in 1995 with our corporate ethos of conserving as we construct, to actually look at the 6 areas of capital, not just about natural capital, but also looking at manufacturing, how we produce, and organization, as well as human. How can we engage internal and external stakeholder, and how can we engage the whole community? And all these will have impact on the business and financial bottom line as well. So with all these, we need to transform our business and towards, a net zero carbon, commitment and action as well. Just give you some example. In Singapore, there are 3 major waste streams. That is food, electronic, packaging, which including mainly plastic. So according to NEA, the National Environmental Agency, more than 60 tons of e-waste is produced yearly in Singapore. And how do we prevent, reduce e-waste and help to recirculate it like cradle to cradle approach that some of the, earlier speaker talked about is very important. And how can we engage vendors to really collect, treat and recycle waste, and hopefully can turn waste into valuable resources as well. And we must set target, not just e-waste, but also overall. For CDL, we have set targets to reduce our overall waste intensity by 16% versus the baseline years of 2016. And for office and industrial building, that is 16%. For our retail, it's 12% by 2030. And we need to reduce the overall, waste goals. And this one is an example of how we focus mainly on plastic waste, and we can't do it alone as a landlord. We also have to engage all tenants to educate and enable them to do so, to collect plastic waste from them, and to also measure the impact. And this is a very first of a kind plastic neutrality certificate to educate, engage, and empower change of building users' behavior, tenants' behavior. And we partners with NGO called 7 Clean Seas and a few global certified plastic, a certified agency. And Tampines Concourse has achieved the first carbon neutral development in Singapore and also the Apac region. Not just about, carbon neutral, but also plastic neutral. And why plastic, I have already explained it earlier. And nothing will change if we don't invest in R&D, research and development. So we have actually engaged some academic and also NGOs to look in low carbon sustainable building materials investment. This is one of the example. If you're still work in progress, it's called a CSAND, which is a sustainable alternative, turning waste to usable building materials and really putting circularity approach to reality. And of course, just talking about it alone is not sufficient. You have to really build a larger ecosystem, engaging, the industry, policymakers, and also the value chain and suppliers and also building users to do it together to decarbonize our built environment, to also look at what are the alternatives, of sustainable building materials. So this is our Net Zero Green Mark Platinum Singapore Sustainability Academy that we opened in June 2017. And over the last few years, we have, held and supported 700 over events and training, to really engage tens of thousands of, friends, industry players and the community and academic to understand why green building is important, why net zero is important, and most importantly is to prove that it is doable. So as the saying goes, it takes a whole village to raise a kid. It also takes the whole ecosystem, to really achieve net zero for the whole built environment. And now with this, I end my presentation with one last hope that we are really engaging the younger startup. And this is actually what we support the young startup by providing them mentorship, network, access to investors, as well as a free share office space, rent-free office space for up to 1 year. And but we are very stringent in selecting social and startup. And we hope that by engaging the young people, engaging their, creative mind, we can actually add on to the industry's efforts. And hopefully we all can enjoy a net zero future. And with this, thank you for your attention, and we'll be happy to share more. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. I think what you have put forward, this slide, is a perfect example of how being resourceful and circulating back to our North Star goal is like. So continue your great work, and thank you so much again for your generous support to our network. Thank you,
Joy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So next, we will have Ms. Hang, and she representing Saint-Gobain. So Saint-Gobain has been our friends for many areas, from our corporate advisory board, from our health and well-being partner, is also our Asia Pacific Festival event partner as well. So Han herself is also one of my personal friends, and she's also a coach in this industry, that one of the like-minded peers that we see each other in this industry. So she is calling us from a beautiful place in the planet. Where are you calling from?
Hi, good morning from Greece. So I'm still on my vacation, but I can't miss this important event. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing your time, your energy, and your inspiration as well. So we're looking forward to hear from you. Over to you, Han.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. And good morning from Greece. Good afternoon for Asian colleges. And thank you for having me. My name is Han. I am currently the Apac Sustainable Market Development Director, and it's my pleasure to share the circular economy inside Saint-Gobain. So to start, I just want to highlight here the current realistic picture that we are facing, illustrated by UN. And this is the natural resources challenge that we are all facing. And you can see that since 1970, every year we extract 3 times more than what we have been doing in 1970. And the surge is from 2000. And if you look at the yellow part in this chart, you will see that the non-metallic minerals, which are mainly sand, gravel, and clay, our main components in buildings, increased 5 times. The other information from this chart you can see is the material productivity represented in this black line here, which is the economic output per tons of material extracted. It hasn't been increased since 1990. And this is a consequence of the linear economy that the previous speakers we all mentioned about. So take for one example of the sand, which is the first application of sand is for construction, for concrete. And we can see that worldwide we use more than 40 billion tons of sand every year. And you know that only 5% of sand can be used. Desert sand is too round to stick in concrete, and we can only use the river sand, marine sand. And today we use twice as much the amount that the natural erosion by the river can produce. And in Southeast Asia, the situation even worse because we have a lot of hydropower plant at the upstream that are worsening the sand production for the country downstream delta. And more than half of the construction will happen in our region. So it is really a challenge for us, and the world is running out of sand. So that is just one critical example of a key material for us. And I come from Saint-Gobain. We are the building material manufacturer. And it is really dramatic problems. And it's the resource scarcity is bringing up the cost already. And it impacts directly on our competitiveness. And for our survival, securing our access to the resources become more and more crucial. And we can't rely forever to the virgin raw material. So we need to find the alternative to replace the virgin non-renewable resources. And we need to do it now. Otherwise, we will face the operational disruption. So it is not only about doing good, it is also about the business risk. So how do we tackle the resource scarcity? And in the previous presentation, all the speaker has highlighted that when you're connecting the dot, the circular economy is a very important element in the whole picture of circularity. And yes, circular economy is an enabler for sustainable development, as well as the net zero carbon future that we are aiming to. So for us, we see circular economy is an effective way to address the resource scarcity and at the same time bring down the CO2 emission. You have mentioned about the scope 3 emissions. So in the next slide, I will share here the real case examples that Saint-Gobain is doing in Apac region. to substitute the raw materials, and through that it also helped to reduce the carbon emission in our production. So the two examples I want to share here is the substitution of cement and sand by so-called waste area. The waste area is the concept that making waste to become a secondary material to input into the new line of production. Yes, and the second initiative is to use the recycling of used refractories. Okay, so in Southeast Asia, Saint-Gobain produce a lot of mortar for construction, and basically there are two main components in the mortar formula. Around 30% of mortar come from cement, and 70% come from sand and fillers. Of course, there are many other additives that make mortars have a superior characteristic, but in mass, there are two main components. And we have globally projects aiming to substitute this material, like Kama project, which have been deployed global-wise and also in Asia, aiming to substitute cement. And for sand, our idea is to manufacture sand, meaning crush and mill rocks into sand, and also utilize the construction waste to produce sand. And the main reason for focusing on these two components are in a high demand for substitution, because for cement, it is not only for natural resource depletion, but it is also for carbon footprint reason. As Esther Ann has highlighted in her presentation, the developer today cared about scope 3. So cement is a big contribution of the scope 3 carbon footprint. Another reason that I didn't put it here is the cost, because cement is also high cost. As for sand, it is mainly for natural resource depletion reason. And this is the example of what we are doing. For sand substitution, we collaborate with other business like ceramics manufacturer. So you know that to produce the foundry, the ceramic foundry people, they use sand in their molding process. And after the foundry pass has been cast, this sand can be recovered to be used in other businesses. So we work with a company in China, the Cefro, the foundry manufacturer, to recover foundry sand in their process to be used in our mortar. The brand name is Weber. And through that, it helped to reduce 20% of virgin sand. Now the cement substitution, which is a more crucial and more difficult for us. And our strategy is to use the waste from other industry. So it is a kind of external recycling. And here are the two examples. One is we use the waste from the steel industry. The other is from palm oil industry. So for the first example, the steel industry, in the middle, you see the pictorial of a blast furnace. And at the bottom of the furnace, there are two segregated materials, the molten iron and the molten slag. And the molten iron is the main material that been used in steel industry. And the slag, molten slag, is inorganic compounds oxide from the raw material. And this slag, after process, the grinding mill process, we receive so-called GGBFS, which means granulated blast furnace slag or slag powders, and this one can be used as a substitution for cement. And this is processed by the steel manufacturer, and is available in big quantity in China, like 100,000 tons, 100 million tons in China. And we are using it in the substitution for cement. The other source is the palm oil industry. So you can see that the palm residue is is come out from the palm fruit processing, and when this being burnt, we will receive the palm ash powder, and this palm ash powder is also can be used as a substitution. And this palm oil industry, the palm ash powder ash can be found in several different countries in the region. So we also use these are the two main source of waste area that we are using in the region. But one thing in mind that when we use waste as a resource, it's not straightforward into the production. You can just fit it into the production line, but there's a lot of things to be considered. So here is our conversion process. You know that the waste cannot transport for too long for the cost reason. Normally, the manufacturer will have to consider what are available next to my plant, let's say 80 to 100 kilometers from my plant. So what are the available material waste area that we can use? And then the regional team, regional R&D team will have to characterize the waste and understand the components and develop the binder and the formula to suit the motor application. So it is a team collaboration between the local team and the regional R&D team to work together on this process. So the result we achieved so far is very positive. You can see for example, China, the two main sources of waste that we are using is GGBFS, as China have quite a strong steel industries, and fly ash, which come from the coal thermal power plants, which have a lot in China. So these are the two main sources of waste that we are using for cement substitution. And today, we can replace 20% of the raw material thanks to this waste. Our target, our short-term target, is to reach 30% in this year. And also because of this effort, we can reduce the CO2 emission to 7,000 tons. And it also generates the cost saving of close to 500,000 euro. So you see, this is a triple hit. It's not only to address the virgin raw material, but also help to reduce the carbon emission and cost saving as well. So the lesson learned for us is we have to look at the values of the waste, but also the cost at the same time to ensure double hits on CO2 and cost. And you see the process have been doing in the whole region, and on overall today we achieve around 30% of waste of raw material avoidance, reduce roughly 50,000 tons of CO2 emissions, and also generates the cost saving of 1.5 million euro. So this is really a win-win situation for a manufacturer like Saint-Gobain, where we can double hit different targets, and as also the top priority project for our regional R&D. The second initiative that we are doing is recycling of used refractories. The project called Valoref. Valoref is the name of the company that are partnered with us in Europe, and the concept is managing the waste at the demolition site. So by sorting waste at the demolition site to remove the unrecyclable waste, it already helped to reduce 5% of the construction of the transportation cost. And then every year, around 35,000 tons of waste have been transferred to the Valoref plant, where 90% of them have been recycling into the secondary material to fit into our production or to sell to other manufacturers. So we are applying the same concept in China, in Dangfeng Innovation Park, near Shanghai. So this is an ongoing project for us. So you can see that circularity is a triple hit for a manufacturer like Saint-Gobain to address also the risk of operational disruption by providing the alternative to virgin raw material. At the same time, help to reduce the carbon emission, address the scope 3 emissions for the developers, and also help for the cost reduction of the operation. So this is not only being good for the environment, but also being good for the business. And to do so, the collaboration is crucial. In the slide of WGBC, Katrina had mentioned about collaboration as a first keyword, and I totally agree, because no one can embark this journey alone. Through my example, you can see that we have to work with partners. And innovation is the key enabler for us to really be able to get into this journey. So I hope that my practical example is helpful. And if you have any more questions, you can contact me. My contact is here. And thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Han. I can see that this is a very good opportunity for Saint-Gobain as well to really convert this global direction to a business opportunity for all of you. So please continue with this innovation and leading the industry towards what is possible and positive. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
All
Joy.
right. Thank you. So next we will have David from WSP. So he will share from a different perspective about resources and circularity. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very well. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I was really interested on that cement replacement item on the last one, because in the UK and in other parts of the world, GGBS and fly ash are used, but I've never heard of palm. So the residual from palm trees, etc., and the processing. So that's something I'm taking away to have a look at in greater detail. So that's fantastic.
Great. Some new shopping list is coming. Okay, back to you, David.
Absolutely. So thank you very much indeed for inviting me onto this call. I'm David Laversha. I'm a property and buildings net zero lead. Whilst I'm based out of the UK, I do have a global remit to make sure that we're upskilling all of our business. And for those of you who might not know who WSP are, we're a global engineering and environmental consultancy with about 60,000 people around the world. So my first slide here is really, I'm not going to go into this in any detail, because hopefully most people on this call are fully and utterly aware of the issues of the circular economy and the linear economy. And we identify that as these stages here. But what I will be looking at today is one very short example of how we can design our buildings better, so that then we can reuse them and drive that flexibility into them from the very beginning. I've got a second case study of where we have refurbished a building, and as previously mentioned by one of our presenters, a significant amount of our buildings will still be around by 2040, 2050 in different parts of the world. So it's really important that we understand how we can refurbish them. But for the bulk of my presentation, I'm going to be looking at the repurposing, and in this case, it's the reuse of structural steel. Because we're really trying to disrupt the market and make sure that we can start reusing our structural steel sections as they are, rather than smelting them down and shipping them around the world, etc. So without further ado, because I'm aware of time, what we have here is a project in the UK, and the original client brief was that this needed to be a very corporate office. During the design process, however, the agents advised that if the client was ever to try to move out of the building, it's very unlikely anyone else in the area would want a high-end corporate office. So really, it was one of those areas that the corporate original brief wanted one thing, but in terms of longevity, there was going to be a challenge. because there'll be a very low demand by future users and potentially ending up as a stranded asset. And stranded assets is something as an industry we really need to start looking at in greater detail. So ultimately, what was ended up being designed was this really flexible call center stroke office, but it's essentially a portal framed shed. And this is really important because that allows future conversion not only into other offices, but into maybe a showroom, car showroom, or furniture showroom, an industrial, or a warehouse. So there's a lot of features here that went into the design to allow that future flexibility, so that if the existing client was to move out, there'd still be a viable building there that wouldn't need to be demolished and rebuilt. So that's a key thing that we need to be looking at. How do we design our buildings for future flexibility? And that's one really good example. The second example is how do we repurpose? How do we retrofit? And now this was a residential conversion in London. It was originally some offices, but what was undertaken is the single floor and a roof was removed. A significant amount of the green, which is the remaining structure, was left in situ, along with 100% of the foundations. There was a significant load balancing exercise that was undertaken, and 3 additional timber floors, which can be seen here in the very light blue, were added. Now, this is important because, again, how do we reuse and repurpose some of our buildings? So in the UK, one of those targets that we have is 300 kilograms of CO2 per meter squared for new build residential buildings. The upfront carbon of this project, taken on board all of the floor area, was 137 kilograms of CO2. And once we're taken on board the carbon sequestration, because those 3 floors were made out of timber, we came in at 34. So that's a really good example of looking at your existing asset and making it work really hard. So those are just 2 examples. But the bulk of my presentation, I'm looking at how do we enable circular steel's the circular economy potential. And what this is, and this really demonstrates the power of collaboration and sharing. So I read this article that was in the Structural Engineer magazine beginning of last year, and it really illustrated that there is no technical reason why we should not be recycling our structural steel. However, the authors could only find 12 examples of where this had actually been undertaken in the last 20 years. This is what generally happens to structural steel when a building is demolished. It is cut up into 4 5-foot long sections, meter long sections. It is then sorted and distributed around the world to go into electric arc furnaces, smelted down and reformed into structural steel work, or cars, or pens, or washing machines, etc. Now, this really, was quite disheartening, and I started thinking, right, we need to do something different about this. So I reached out to one of the major material recyclers in Europe, a company called EMR, and they stated that in any 1 month they have 100,000 tons of structural steel going through their processes. There are no technical challenges to reusing structural steel work. We just need to go through a testing process. And one of the key data points, and this is always important, understanding where the data is, the scrap value is about £250 per ton. So that's about $280 per ton. But to buy new steel is about £850 per ton, i.e. $950 per ton. So there's a massive price point there. And that you can utilize to overcome all of the challenges that you have. However, to try to disrupt the market, because this is not undertaken widely, really, is we needed 2 angles of attack. We need to collaborate with all parts of the supply chain to build new processes. But the supply chain aren't going to build up all these new processes unless they can see there's an actual demand. The second angle of attack over the last 15 months has been actually building that demand by illustrating that active projects want to reuse steel. So, some of the challenges: speed of construction has not generally allowed disassembly. The moment a client wants a new building built, they want the old building that was on that site demolished as quickly as possible. The true value of materials and the cost of emissions has not been realized and factored into appraisals. Who controls the quality assurance associated with testing and the stockpiling of that reused material? The ease of designing and specifying, procurement and fabrication is always a challenge in terms of how do you take this reused material and put it into a new building. Matching the supply and demand, but also the aesthetics. So those are some of the challenges, along with insurance and the QA process. But the QA process eliminates that risk because it's suitably tested. So, 2 examples that I've got here. So we're working on the refurbishment of Centre Block, which is the Canadian Parliament building built in 1920/1921. This is a picture of it when it was being originally built 100 years ago, with that significant structural frame, as you can see there. So there's significant part of the works there are reforming the whole of that building and reducing the operational carbon to 0. But those areas in the yellow and the dotted red lines are the areas that were to be earmarked for demolition. And what we started looking at is that structural steel that is there. Can we harvest that and then reuse that elsewhere on the same development? And yes, we absolutely could. So what we identified, there was 4,500 structural steel elements that would be removed. We undertook extensive testing to prove that steelwork could be used. The Canadian Building Code allows for a certain strength to be utilised, but we did test against that. And currently, at this moment in time, we've identified 1,700 reused elements, and that's going to be about 25% of the new build elsewhere on the site. And that is saving 750 tons of CO2. Now, really, this is, and we're still going through the other 2,800 elements to see where else can we reuse those. So this process is currently ongoing. And this really is a proof of the principle. Close to the home in the UK, where I sit, we have a commercial office, and we're working with the UK supply chain to look at how can we extract. So from EMR, they're starting to build up an inventory now of the structural steel elements. They are stockpiling and testing. And at this moment in time, we've identified about 50% of this new build can be used from that stockpile that's been built up. And that's about 187 tons. And that is saving in the order of 300 tons of CO2. So putting my section to a close, because this really is about trying to incentivize everyone to look at those no-brainer, those items and those ideas you have about this is a really good idea. How do you go about doing this? This has been an 18-month journey that we've been on. WSP, we now have multiple projects where reused steel is being deployed and being explored. Momentum is really building now to start, working with our clients to start looking at, rather than demolishing buildings, how can we deconstruct those buildings to retain those elements at the highest value state? There was a conference held in the UK by the UK Green Building Council back in July. There was over 100 attendees there, which is fabulous. The whole supply chain and clients are now getting engaged. And really, one of the cherries on the cake is EMR, that steel reprocessing company that I talked about earlier. They've just produced their EPD, and someone mentioned earlier the importance of environmental product declarations, and that illustrates that the reuse of structural steel actually costs 47 kilograms of CO2 per ton, and that is compared against a UK average, and this is varies around the world, but the UK average of 1,580 kilograms. So that is a 97% saving on carbon if you can reuse structural steelwork. So you combine that with the cost element that I mentioned earlier, between the 250 and the 850 pounds per ton, and you can see this complete no-brainer, but the whole supply chain needs to be amended to allow it to actually occur. And again, to put this into perspective in terms of the quantum, if 100%, and I'm not saying that 100% is viable, but if 100% of EMR's monthly scrap could be diverted and reused, just in the UK alone, and this is one material supply chain, that's 1.8 million tons of CO2 that can be saved. So there's a significant amount that can be challenged and attacked here. And really, just finishing off, Working with those supply chain partners over the last 18 months, we're putting together a follow-up article to the one that inspired me from last year for the Structural Engineer magazine. That's all ready to go, and that's going to be published in September. So my message to everyone on this call is, if you think there's an item that is a complete no-brainer, if you are identified where there's significant carbon savings that can be made, be really bold and go for it, and you can make a difference. So thank you very much indeed. Back to you, Joy.
David. Thank you. What a bold adventure as well, and such a strong statement that when we're looking at something close to our home, close to our hands, there's a lot of gems that we can pick up. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Cheers. And then if there's any question to our panel speakers, please feel free to leave in the comments, and we'll try our best to answer you. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next, we will have Nick from WinZero. WinZero is also our net zero, our collaborator in resource and circularity. So he will be sharing with us about transforming buildings for a circular economy. Hi, good morning, Nick.
Hi, morning, Joy.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Some excellent presentations today. The bar's been set very high, I think.
All right, we're looking forward to hearing from yours. Over to you.
Good. So hello, my name is Nick Harris. I'm the Technical Director at WinZero EMEA. I'm fortunate to have been with the company for 25 years, and over that time I've seen significant advances in the technology that is used to design and deliver built assets. Now I feel we've never been better placed to take advantage of the accessibility of technologies such as cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and digital twins to better manage resources and drive circularity in construction. At WinZero, we believe that the ongoing digitalization of the construction industry is key to us meeting our net zero obligations for the built environment. Our technical solutions and professional services have been developed to enable our customers to achieve their own technological and sustainability goals, their leadership goals. We're a global brand with centers of excellence in the US, Europe, India, Australia, and New Zealand. Today, I want to highlight the importance of data-centric design technology and the role it plays in enabling circularity for the built environment. There are a number of trends that we are seeing that will support the adoption of circularity. Easier access to analysis, simulation, and collaboration technology at the planning and design phases. The convergence of manufacturing and construction best practice to accelerate the adoption of industrialized construction methodologies. The flow of data between product manufacturers and building designers is also becoming easier. Digital models can now be more easily exchanged with higher geometry fidelity and richer performance data. The opportunity to digitize the construction phase of the project is also significant and potentially hugely impactful. And digital twins that allow us to verify design and construction decisions and feedback highly valuable operation data will inform future sustainable asset designs. A recent FMI report on the engineering and construction industry suggests that as much as 95% of all data created in the project life cycle still goes unused. Whilst that statistic is concerning, we have also seen that BIM, the foundation of digitalization, has been adopted by over 65% of building designers in the UK. However, we're now in a new phase of digitalization of construction, where we must take advantage of the data we have at our fingertips. We started with the transition from paper to digital, followed by building information modeling that delivered better productivity and project visibility. Most recently, increasingly complex projects and the impact of the global pandemic have accelerated the adoption of cloud-connected BIM, which allows us to share and review project data instantaneously and even work on the same building model simultaneously, regardless of where we are located. In this fourth phase, we are in an era in which data will be more centralized and flow more fluidly among project stakeholders. Insights will be driven from the performance data generated at the operational phase that will allow us to make better decisions at the planning and design stages of the next project. The project information we procure right from the planning phase must be fit for use in the digital twin that will ultimately be the tool that will allow us to collectively learn from the performance of our buildings, our cities, and our infrastructure. And design simulation lets stakeholders use the insights they gather in designing, building, and owning a structure. This is where technologies such as generative design, AI, and machine learning which are already available in BIM tools such as Autodesk Revit, add value. Every insight they capture can inform the next building they develop. For example, AI can help the architect and engineers optimize the design for a school based on designs for hundreds of schools of similar sizes, regions, and requirements. The system can incorporate tools such as social listening, capturing sentiment about those other schools from the comments and ranking on social media. That sentiment data can inform future decisions when the architect needs to retrofit a building or generate a new design. Software vendors like Autodesk are now testing even more advanced sustainability analysis functionality embedded directly in their design products for both building and product designers. They give feedback on common measures, as well as circularity measures such as the cost of disassembly and the use of material reuse after demolition. The adoption of modern methods of construction is also highly reliant on the digitalization of the design process and the use of intelligent digital models. We are continuing to learn from the manufacturing industry on how to optimize our use of resources through lean manufacturing techniques, standardization, and reuse of components and assemblies. As we see a further convergence of manufacturing and construction, we have an opportunity to influence the way designers rethink the way our buildings are put together at the industrial, product, and data level. Extending the well-understood focus on design manufacture, we also have the ability to design for circularity. By thinking about how building components can be disassembled and including that guidance in the BIM model, we are providing the builders of the future every opportunity to make the best use of the bank of material in our assets. For example, the removal of adhesives that make the reuse and recycling of building components more difficult requires some engineering effort. We have the technology to allow designers to digitally re-engineer their products and use complex analysis to verify their structural integrity and performance without the need to fabricate multiple physical prototypes. And at the heart of the BIM design process is the assembly of digital components and materials that exhibit the properties and behaviors of their real-world counterparts into a building model. Consequently, manufacturers play a vital role in the push to net zero, not just the design and production of their output, but by making rich product data available to their customers. If we are to make material and energy passports pervasive, we need the support of all manufacturers, and we're starting to see some progress here. We recently worked on a project with a drywall manufacturer, a notorious source of waste in the construction industry, to allow contractors to use a BIM model to optimize the use of standard panels and place accurate orders with the manufacturer. We developed a plugin for Autodesk Revit that connected directly to the manufacturer's online catalog that allowed the designer to evaluate and specify exactly the right product for the application whilst delivering the most sustainable design. Now, product designers now have access to advanced AI technologies such as generative design right within their current design environment, which allows them to take material and resource optimization to the next level. Over-engineering components can represent a significant source of material and energy waste. Now, by allowing the cloud to come up with the best design option, coupled with additive manufacturing techniques, we can reduce the amount of virgin resources used in building components. Powered by the cloud, the next generation of construction management technology allows us to take the pre-construction building model and use it to make accurate decisions on site. A better flow of information into the construction phase inevitably results in fewer errors, rework, and material waste. However, the accuracy of the information that's collected during the construction phase and used to augment the information model is also vitally important. At the point of handover, the building information model must include much more data about the construction and commissioning process if we were to hand over a truly effective twin. Conceptually, a digital twin is a virtual replica of a built asset that is a dynamic digital reflection of its physical self. Bidirectional connections between the physical and digital enable them to possess the operational and behavioral awareness necessary to simulate, predict, and inform decisions based on real-world conditions. Importantly, we can take advantage of that unused 95% of information to plug the gaps in understanding of how the physical asset will perform. More importantly, digital twins provide an opportunity to transform the built asset lifecycle. We can affect this transition by tracking a digital thread of information that links organisations and data with an end-to-end digital process spanning capital planning, architecture, engineering, construction, asset management, and ultimately circularity. Digital twins can help close the feedback loop that will continuously inform us how best to operate our buildings as well as plan for the future. Think of the Tesla model. Each Tesla car feeds back information to Tesla about actual performance and driver behaviour. That data is then used by the company to make engineering changes to the cars in production, as well as software updates for cars on the road and optimise their performance. This same approach can apply to equipment in our buildings and furthermore the evolution of our understanding of how our buildings should be reused in the future. And we should be prepared to share our data to better inform a collective understanding of how best to move forward in each city, country, or region. Ultimately, in the future, a building information model will not be considered to be complete if it doesn't contain all the valuable information and guidance on how to recycle, reuse, or repurpose the bank of material it contains. Finally, I wanted to show you the output of a project my colleagues at Autodesk have been working on with a house builder to deliver real-time dashboards displaying how a building may perform as a bank of materials based on the current BIM model. By making changes to material choices in the BIM model, the designer or owner can understand in real time which and how much of the embedded resources will be reusable for future generations. And that's me. So thank you for your time today, and I look forward to connecting with you in the future.
Thank you, Nick. Exactly. I think resource and circularity is so diverse and so it's all over the place. So how could this integration happen without the technology and digitalization? And I really love to repeat one of your very strong phrase here, that please share your data, because
Absolutely.
Only when we have the data contributed from the real life like industry, we're able to make more sense and start to be more predicting and more accurate in the way moving forward. So thank you so much for sharing such an important message to our industry.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you. All right, so next we will have Chris. So from Foster and Partners. So in June, we had our leadership summit in the World Green Building Council, and we also had this privilege to visit your beautiful office. So Chris, today we're really delighted to hear from you about the design perspectives on circularity. So looking forward to your artful sharing.
So good morning, good evening where you are. It's a pleasure to be with you today. So good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, it's a few technical hitches. So I'm just going to bring you some design perspectives on circularity and the trends that we've seen developing over the last 5 or 6 years. I'm Chris Trott, and I'm the head of sustainability at the integrated architectural and engineering practice Foster and Partners. So for those of you that might not be familiar with us or our work, we design buildings, we design cities, we design places for communities, and we design products. So what I would say first off is the benefits of circularity. What are they? What do we see? So it's about reduced new resource use. It's about reduced carbon dioxide and other waste streams. It's about reduced climate change. It's about increased regeneration of ecology and biodiversity. It's about increased regeneration of other species, and it's about increased value retention in existing assets. So the first observation are around our priorities are where we have existing buildings, we always try to prioritize to retain them through either refit and refurbishment, and I'll take you through an example a little later. When new construction is, however, the only feasible option, the priority is to reclaim existing components, reduce the need for new material, and provide resilience for the future. So this diagram takes us through some of the thinking of that process through manufacturing, construction, and then end of use. And as I've just said, the building retention is the most important part of circularity. It's the thing that we should always prioritize first. Some component reuse will happen in any case, and that should be the next priority. And ultimately, we should be looking at material recycling. If we look at the EN 15978 kind of life cycle, then we'll have seen that a couple of times today, and at each point of that life cycle there is something to be gained by and contributed to the circular economy through manufacturing and construction, in use and end of life. So in manufacturing and construction there are enormous gains that can be made through retaining, reclaiming and reduced use of materials. During use, what we're looking for is design for flexibility, adaptability and longevity. And at end of life, we're looking at design for deconstruction, and we have to look at that right at the beginning of the design process, and reuse of materials. So if we look at this building, which is Willis Famer Dumas, which is a building that we designed in the 70s, flexibility has been the key of that building to retain it in use throughout that whole period of time. And you can see on the left here, originally individual typewriters were used in it. Then first generation desktop computing in the 90s, and then this millennium, distributed servers and distributed desktop technology. So by creating a very flexible space, that building is has been retained in use a long time. This is a study we did of a building recently where we looked at 4 scenarios. We looked at the first scenario, which was to demolish the building completely and rebuild it to current building regulation standards. The second one was to demolish it completely and do an absolutely optimized rebuild to best new technologies. The third was a partial demolition of only some of the roof to replace high-level accommodation, and then to rebuild it, and then to repurpose a car park within the building. And finally, it was partial demolition at the roof, and then rebuild that and just repurpose the rest of the building with latest fit out. And you can see the blue bars stepping down. That's the amount of carbon that was involved in each of those processes. And the light blue carbon at the bottom was the avoided carbon that we avoided with each of those scenarios. And for us, what was quite important here was this orange line, and the orange line is actually the waste streams that came out of that process. And it's the first time that we had a real recognition that reduced waste and reduced carbon could be calculated together and were both very similar trends. I'll talk very quickly now through a building that we designed for Acciona, which is their Ombu building in Madrid. This is written up in the WGBC Beyond the Business Case report. And I would recommend anybody to look at that report. There are many, many good case studies in it about how to sustainably design buildings. This was the building, and longevity has been a key here because it was first designed and completed construction in 1907. It's a very large, spacious building, which has allowed flexibility and adaptability throughout that whole period of life. We've done, as we do for all of our buildings, a life cycle assessment, and we normally look at 60 years. We look at all of the construction of the building, we look at the refurbishment of the building, we look at the fit out of the building, we look at its energy in use, and we look at how people will travel to and leave the building during use, which we think is very important. And the first thing to point out is, in the original design period, decisions made there will obviously impact the opportunities for future refurbishment. So you have to think of these things early. This is a little video that takes you through the building, and it shows that we calculated the embodied carbon of the building only at about 7.9 tons of carbon. We looked at its operational and transport carbon at about 2.2 tons, and we looked at its ecological footprint, and from that we deduced that this is a 2 degrees climate forcing temperature building. Now those numbers are higher than you might often see, because we use a hybrid input-output calculation method, which we think is more truthful in terms of the signal that we get from it. We also looked at what would happen if we provided new accommodation for the building instead of reuse the building. And had it been new accommodation, there would have been about 12.5 tonnes of carbon. Just reusing the existing building would have been about half that at 7.9. We did completely reuse the existing building, but we also had to put some additional new accommodation on the site, bringing the total up to 9.4. So that shows that you can still do a 2 degrees building even if you need some new construction. We retained all of the original trusses in the roof. We put timber mezzanine flooring, sequestering about 1,640 tonnes, and we retained 10,000 tonnes of original masonry and brickwork. So this is an internal shot of the building which opened about a month ago. All of that timber there is prefabricated and demountable. Externally, we reconditioned all of the brickwork so as we could use it. We regenerated landscape and offered back a new public realm. And the whole building was retained in use. We reintroduced ecology, and we are encouraging biodiversity on the site. So going back to my original slide, we reduced new resource use, we reduced CO2 and other waste streams, we reduced climate change, and we increased the regeneration of ecology and biodiversity. We increased regeneration and other species, and we increased value retention in the existing asset on the site, which is going to enter fit out shortly, the base building having already been handed over as complete. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to any further comments that you might have in the chat.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. What a beautiful design. We almost missed it. Thank you. Experience today. I feel nice to bring you back in this kind of technical disruption. How are you feeling?
No, all good. Thank you. Yeah, with 3 screens and various different calls. Hopefully that one, I can see it on the screen at the moment. So hopefully this one's working.
Exactly. But nevertheless, I think when Han was talking about the Saint-Gobain's business case, immediately I was remembered about your sharing that about the business case of incorporating circularity. So yeah, so looking forward to hear from you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the invitation. Great to be here, and good, as everyone said, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're dialing in from. I'm Phil Kelly, Director Head of Sustainability for Buildings at Ramble in the UK. And I want to talk today about the importance of a bespoke business case for incorporating circularity. So for those who haven't heard of or worked with Ramble, we are a global organisation working across 30 different countries. We are consultants, engineers, scientists, economists, and hopefully we are bringing our global expertise to the Circularity Accelerator project with the World Green Building Council. And we're very pleased to be the global program partner for this and to bring our experience to this forum. So when we look at the business case from a global scale, so we know that the construction industry consumes almost 100 billion tonnes of virgin resources and is responsible for 40% of global CO2 emissions. And then when we look at perhaps a regional scale, on the right-hand side is an example from London. It says that within London, the construction industry consumes 400 million tonnes of materials annually and is responsible for over half of the waste generated within the city every year. It's also got plenty of other figures and data files as part of its demand for circularity statements within the region. But even with this global and regional numbers, why is circularity not being adopted at scale to try and address these problems? We've been working with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WBCSD, and in their report on the left-hand side, it looked at the key barriers, 5 of which that are perhaps preventing or slowing down the scaling of the built environment. And then last year in October, we published a report on the business case for circular buildings, exploring the economic, the environmental and the social value that can be generated from adopting of circularity. As part of that, we generated first off, the definition of a circular building and how it differs from merely a sustainable building. And when we look at the high level element of this definition, it looks at three key areas. It looks at resource use, it looks at waste generation and reduction, but it looks at these across the entirety of the life cycle. Now, it's got an extended definition of the different models and the different elements of incorporating circularity. But I think what's important is to show that when exploring these different parts of value, that means very different things to different actors and different people within the supply chain. The benefits of circularity will be different for an investor, for a designer, a building operator, ultimately all the way through to the building owner, the building operator, and the building users. The value is going to be seen, captured, and experienced very differently. Therefore, a one-size-fits-all business case for adopting circularity is not going to work. So within the report, we set out this process of how to generate this business case. Depending on your stakeholder perspective on the left, there's a three-stage piece looking at the quantifying of business benefit. What are the elements that are going to be of value to you? What business models do you need to explore to generate that value? And finally, let's have a look at some future scenarios that might adapt or strengthen or alter that business case that you've generated. We look at those three different types of value. So first of all, economic value. Will there be a reduction in the operational expenditure or the capital expenditure or the purchasing of materials associated with adopting circularity? What are the environmental benefits? Is there an upfront carbon or a life cycle carbon saving, reducing material that goes to landfill? What are those environmental benefits? And then finally, the social benefits as well, be it jobs, be it supporting local economy, supporting local social enterprises. Looking at these three values, they're going to be different for different people within the value chain. Once you've looked at those, these are the 5 primary business models, again, in line with those reports I shared, that can really look into the opportunity to generate, but also capture those 3 different types of value for each person. Now, I won't go into each of these in detail because I've got some examples coming up, but these are the 5 key business models that could be adopted to look at capturing that value. But once you've combined those first 2 elements, the last piece is to look at future scenarios. Now, arguably, you'd look at these and think these actually aren't too much future scenarios, or perhaps even live scenarios that we've got at the moment. Resource scarcity, both the availability and the cost of virgin materials, looking at legislative change, continuing legislation around CO2 emissions, but also landfilling, virgin resource extraction, etc. But then also market volume and the opportunities, the risk, but also opportunities that might generate as more sustainable circular buildings become not just higher value, but become the norm. What's the risk of the decrease in value of buildings that aren't circular, that aren't sustainable in the future? So in that report, it does look at this 3-stage process. On the left, looking at where you sit in that value chain, moving through, picking out those economic, environmental, and social value points that will mean something to your particular part in that construction industry, and then looking at the models and the future scenarios that might impact and generate ultimately that business case for adopting circularity. So I'm going to take you through some of the examples. As I said, we're a global business. We've got doing a lot of things in the UK, in Europe, and further afield. I want to show you some examples of how we've used this scenario to actually help clients capture that value. First of which, working with retail clients. This is an example whereby we know that the life cycle or the lifespan of this building is particularly short, perhaps 25 years in comparison to buildings with longer lives. Therefore, we've explored the models of resource recovery and also certainly looked at the future scenario of virgin material resource being more scarce. And by using not just low energy and low carbon materials, but also adopting design for disassembly techniques, the entirety of this asset can be dismantled, deconstructed, and then reassembled in a different location. And by doing that, we've facilitated a 50% reduction in the life cycle carbon of this asset. Looking beyond a single asset case, again, we're working a lot in the sports and recreation sector. And by spending, as it were, some embodied carbon in refurbishing this particular arena, we're going to facilitate it, not just delivering the annual sporting calendar of one arena, but also of an adjacent arena as well. So being able to combine all of those calendars, all of those events across the year into one aspect, the carbon emissions associated per visitor is actually significantly reduced. So considering sustainability at a much grander scale, much bigger scale to look at carbon in a different metric, looking at sharing platforms, again, using the asset as efficiently as humanly possible, and also in cognizance of the fact that people are going to be demanding more and more sustainable events within this sector within the future. Again, working with clients, we are continuously trying to forecast what is the demand of the future. Working with clients that are constructing buildings to lease out to tenants, being that an office or other types of spaces, what are tenants going to be demanding at the point at which this construction is finished? But also in 5, 10, 15, 30 years' time, we want this asset to continue to be of high value and to be incredibly appealing throughout its life cycle. So we're exploring many different construction details and testing them on site, looking at different ways that buildings can be adapted to meet the changing needs of the future. Expanding the product life cycle is obviously a key model that came into this business case opportunity, and looking at legislative change. Now, in London, the local planning authority or municipality is actually taking a lot more interest in construction projects that are proposing to demolish existing buildings and rebuild on top of them. So again, the ability to continue to adapt our existing buildings is only going to become more and more important in the future. Ramboll are also experts in timber construction and also modern methods of construction, so that includes off-site manufacture. Now, the benefits of employing these methodologies are not just using low carbon building materials, but a significant reduction in waste, incredibly efficient use of material to construct those buildings, but also significantly shortening the construction time on site as well. So there is economic, there's environmental change, and also by supporting local manufacturers that adopt these practices, it certainly supports them in increasing the skill set within our industry, which has a societal change as well. So again, circular supply opportunities, looking at the legislative change of needing to use low carbon building materials throughout the future. Circularity was a big part of this project for us. Net zero carbon arguably is an element of circularity. When we say circularity is the reduction or the minimization of resource use, that includes energy across the entire life cycle. Ramboll are delivering a number of net zero carbon new construction projects, which is good, but arguably more importantly is our work with transitioning existing assets to net zero carbon. Now, a couple of the fellow presenters have already said about the challenge whereby in 2050, a large proportion of those buildings in operation are already in operation today. So we're going to have to get really good as an industry at transitioning all of our existing building stock to hit that net zero target. We've helped a client look at this 1970s office building, adapting the facade, the systems, the renewables, doing that waterfall approach to actually achieving a net zero and continuing this product's lifespan as long as humanly possible. Lastly, I'd like to bring your attention to the opportunity to reuse materials. Now in Norway, Ramboll operate an online platform called Rehub. Now we understand that the opportunities for circular supplies, circular materials is only going to increase. The opportunity for sharing platforms, as I said, those two building models are only going to facilitate a circular construction industry in the future. And when you consider those future scenarios, the increased cost, the reduced availability of virgin material, and the continued market volume increase of more sustainable construction techniques and buildings, this facilitates people both selling and procuring reused construction material online, and also assists those in achieving the recertification so that it can be used in other areas too. So again, hopefully you found today's content interesting and exploring, and I'd be more than happy to engage with anyone who wants to know a little bit further. Joy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. And I can see that the business case is a super important message for us. And it's also, especially in this beginning of the transition, we need this kind of strong statements to show us that it can be done and what are the benefits that all the stakeholders are getting. And thank you so much for sharing. Is there some of the questions and some of the notes maybe in the chat box? Continue to put it on if you have any question to Phil or any other of the speakers as well. Thank you so much, Phil. Let's quickly introduce our next speaker. Jeff is really one of our best friends, and he's also the pioneer and also the leader in the GBCs. And he is also the person I borrowed the joke from. I'm not sure whether you captured this awkward joke I was sharing in the beginning, but this is where I have recycled from. From Jorge, you will see the recording later, but how are you?
I'm very well, Joy. How are you?
That's awesome. So that's your evening already. Thank you so much for sharing and spending time with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Am I free to go? Can you hear me okay? And you can see the slides fine?
Yes, all set. Over to you.
Fantastic. Well, first off, thank you very much, Joy, for having me here. And thanks very much to everyone that has dialed in from whatever time zone you're in. I'm here in Australia right now, and it's about 7:13 p.m. my time. So I'm going to jump into it. My name is Jeff Oatman. I'm the head of collaboration and membership at the GBCA. And for those of you, I don't know how many people from Australia are here, but for those of you who don't know who the GBCA is or what we do, we're the Green Building Council of Australia, and we lead the sustainable transformation of the built environment. And when people say, well, what exactly is that? We say there's 4 key areas that we work in. So we run a sustainability rating system framework called Green Star. So if you're familiar with Green Mark or Beam Plus or BREEAM or LEED, it's a similar version to that, but to the Australian context. We also spend a bit of time advocating to government as well to help try to influence and change policy to more sustainable outcomes. We have a whole education platform and training and the like. And of course, we have 656 members across the property spectrum. So we've got a fairly big organization, and we try to punch above our weight down here in Australia. And what we found is over the past maybe 5 years or so, we've seen an exponential growth in sustainability and the demand for sustainable property in a sustainable property sector, which is fantastic. And these are just some graphs of the number of certifications that we've seen year on year. And while they're increasing, if we looked at the number of new project registrations that are currently in the pipeline and going through, we would see that much, much sharper. So there's been a huge demand, which in many ways is great. We want to get there, but I don't have to go and revisit all of the stats around the challenge we face. We know that the built environment is going to double by 2050, which is huge. And of course, there's very significant issues and problems and challenges that we have to deal with in going that around climate action, resource efficiency, resource use, and ultimately the health and well-being of the people who are using the spaces. So from our point of view, we also have another challenge here. Of course, Australia is a big country. It's very unique, and that it's quite big, and it's also quite empty. It's very it's not very dense. So I think from a population density point of view, I was looking at this a few minutes ago, and you had something like 3 people per square kilometer, compared to Singapore, which is over 8,000 people a square kilometer. So from a circular economy point of view, if you could imagine you're on the West Coast and you've got a business with some sort of take back scheme, and you wanted to support your market in that respect, and you supply most of your products to the East Coast, is a huge barrier to potentially influence. And you can see a lot of people saying, well, I don't want to push that far. So we've got some work to do, and that's no excuse. It's just a challenge of a barrier that we're going to try and knock down. So what we've been doing, we've had a look at ourselves and said, well, what can we do to try to influence more sustainable outcomes in the products and services space, particularly around resources and circularity? And when we look at the different areas that we influence in, whether if it's advocacy or collaboration or education or the rating systems, we're pretty good with the buildings. We spend a lot of time working with the owners and the developers and the consultants and the like. To a certain degree, we're doing all right with advocacy to government, and there's certain areas where we've got a lot of runs on the board, and there's some other areas where there's some work to do. But we realize with products, there's quite a lot of work that we can do here. So it's a huge opportunity for us. And one of the ways we started looking at this to try to tackle this is say, okay, well, let's look at what we've done from a carbon point of view. And there's a number of all these documents. You can jump online and you can download these things for free. Just Google them. But this is basically some of the work that we've either written ourselves or we've co-written around how we look at carbon and shifting that conversation from a climate positive roadmap for the built environment from now to 2050 and how we meet the Paris objectives to the work we've done with the World Green Building Council on bringing embodied carbon up front. And then now we've subsequently launched a resources circular economy research paper. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Products and materials have also been involved in Green Star for quite a long time. And from us, we were looking at this and saying, well, if this is an area that we can influence, maybe it's the way we look at how we define products to take on a bit more of a significant structure around resources and circularity. So this is a big piece of work that we're doing at the moment. I had mentioned that we put out this circular economy discussion paper, and this was earlier in the year, and it was basically saying, what's going on in the circular economy in Australia? What do we know about it? What do people think about it? And what's the feedback we're getting? And it's quite interesting. There's a couple of definitions we have here, one from the World Economic Forum and one simply from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And we like them both, but I think the simplicity of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation definition is one that seems to resonate with a lot of people and they're used to. But when we looked at the research, we found that there was definitely a lot of organizations that sort of start off on the efficiency side, and then they move from efficiency to more sustainability and then to circularity. And really, if we want circularity to stick, we need to integrate this really as strategy and as core strategy and looking to see how we can impact things at that level. When we did our engagement study, some of the feedback we got was quite interesting. And as you can imagine, a lot of people think about resources and circularity and circular economy as heavy recycling, or recycling on steroids is a term that comes up quite a bit. So we found that a lot of people really thought it as just recycling. There's a lot of people who really don't understand it or are very early in their journey with the circular economy. And of course, this lack of awareness and the importance of training and development and the stuff that we're doing with organizations like the World Green Building Council and all the speakers that we've had so far to help build capacity is really key if we're going to tackle this properly. So for us, we look at this and say, well, this is also a huge opportunity on our side in Australia. We know that the building materials sector accounts for about 8% of Australia's total emissions. So it's a pretty big number, and we got to try to reduce that. And as our grid electrifies, we're going to see that the upfront or embodied carbon content is going to get much higher, and the operational content is going to get much lower. So we're going to have even a sharper focus on this. But I think what's been highlighted a couple of times tonight is there's a huge opportunity, a huge financial business opportunity for organizations that want to jump in and really start to solve some of these problems. So for us, we're really wrapping up our strategy around how we attack the circular economy piece is really a combination of advocacy and education to work to incentivize or support governments to look at circularity within the work that they do, as well as the education that's going to underpin this. We're working closely with our product manufacturers and the product certification schemes here in Australia to get them across what circular economy is and incentivize them through our rating system, which is Green Star. And as an example here, we put out, this is within Green Star, we have different credits similar to a lot of the other rating tools. We had one we developed earlier this year, this is last year, on the circular economy. And this is really trying to encourage project teams to look for more circular economic approaches to the work that they do and giving them credit. And the idea is that we can take that information and we can spread that out widely and broadly and hopefully get more uptake as this space emerges. We're also quite excited working with our product manufacturers as well too. We put out our responsible products framework, which is how we're looking at products and materials within the Green Star rating system. And also, and it's a little bit longer term project, but it's currently underway in the scoping stage, is developing a responsible products database. And a big part of both of these is to really help people understand and raise the awareness of what this looks like and changing how we look at Green Star products to include more circularity around them. We've also got some really important industry partnerships, and this has come up a couple of times tonight, is the importance of working with other like-minded organizations to really harness and drive change. We know we can't do it ourselves, so working with our friends at the World Green Building Council, or here locally with organizations like Neighbours or MECLA, the Materials Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance, which is basically all like-minded parties trying to get to the same direction, working to use all of our hands to make lighter work. there's quite a lot of work that we have to do, but that's fine. There's definitely demand and interest, so we need to radically collaborate and harness that collective goodwill to come to some great opportunities to make change. And there was a couple of quick things I'd like to wrap up with. These are some of the things we're thinking with in terms of opportunities to consider. Of course, I've got to give a plug for the World Green Building Council's Advancing Net Zero Carbon Buildings commitment. So for those of you who are not aware of this, it's effectively a commitment to get to net zero for the buildings that you own, you occupy, or you have, or you manage in some way, to net zero by 2030. And these are, I think this is what, over 150 signatories. Currently, Australia's got 34, and we're very proud of them, and we're growing this list week by week, and it's quite an interesting bellwether of the organizations that are taking a global leadership position around how we're going to get there. And getting to net zero also encompasses a pretty important piece of the operational side of things and how renovations and retrofits are undertaken, and circular economy fits directly in there. So we've got all sorts of organizations that are demanding this, and I would recommend, if any of you are interested, to speak to your local Green Building Council or speak to join the team to get some more information on that. The other one is around procurement, and more procurement and more procurement. For us, we're spending time working with government agencies to try to embed that very, very early in the circular economy, early in the piece around procurement, because if we can get contractual language defined at the contract stage right at procurement, then this helps to set the trajectory for how the projects are delivered. We've been working with NatSpec to design specific specification clauses that builders and contractors can just lift, and they can be put in the contracts that will require them to look at and consider circular economy objectives. And if we can do that, and we can start getting the broader built environment to think that way, then they'll start to learn the expectations of that, and things will expand from there. And the last one, and I say last one, there's actually two ideas here. First one, local partnerships and global supply chains. So working with organizations like the World Green Building Councils and other big rating tool bodies, we've got this really strong collective will of all these other independent organizations within our broader community, how we can bring them together to try to sort of galvanize and get everyone's collective will all in one, so we're not randomly running around in different directions and doing different things. That's really important, and it's been mentioned a few times that we can do really great on one building or on a bunch of buildings, but unless we have everyone on board, we're really not going to make the progress that we need. And the other one, and this is one that we're really focusing on, is moving from products themselves. We want more sustainable products that have got circularity built into them, but instead of awarding the product itself, we want to continue doing that, but we also want to see if we can influence the actual suppliers of the product. Because if we can get a supplier of a product saying, we need you to change your supply chain of all your products, that's going to have a way bigger impact than saying, give us your green range of products and then nothing else. And then, potential buyer can choose whatever they want. We want to go straight to the source and influence the source at the top so that everything else filters down. I'll stop right there. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I hung to my 10 minutes or not, but I'll pass the mic back to you, Joy.
Thank you. No worries. Definitely enjoying listening from you. And also every time Green Building Council Australia are the thought leaders in our network that bring a lot of valuable and free resources that we could learn from. So I have actually put in some of the links. Maybe Jeff, if there's any more link or resources, you could also share with the audience as well. If there's any question, please feel free to put it in there. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thanks.
Thank you. So final one, we have a very special guest today. And we wanted to really think about, when we talk about climate action, health and well-being, resource and circularity, beyond technical, beyond digitalization, beyond consultants' knowledge, experience, and all these leadership, there's actually one very important aspect that we rarely touch, which is the rights, the human rights. We talk about transitioning, we talk about collaboration. So this is something that is also the first time we wanted to bring this attention to our network. So I won't let more of the detail up, and then I will pass to Andrea to share with us about just transition in the built environment. Over to you, Andrea.
Thank you, Joy, for such a beautiful introduction, and thank you, World Green Building Council, for the invitation to speak here today. And for those who don't know us, the Institute of Human Rights and Business is a think tank on business and human rights, and it is our mission to shape policy, advance practice, and strengthen accountability to make respect for human rights part of everyday business. And today we've been talking about circularity in the built environment and buildings and infrastructure, and I kind of want to zoom out a little bit and reflect with you on what is exactly the built environment and the importance of thinking from a human rights perspective and approaching circularity in construction from a rights-based perspective as well. So the built environment can be understood as the places where we live, work, and interact with others, and that has a defining influence over our ability to lead healthy and fulfilling lives. And our efforts to address the world's biggest challenges like inequality and climate change hinge in many ways on what, where, how, and for whom we build. And this leads me to the harmful impacts of extractive industries and the complex supply chains in the built environment, which have major environmental and climate impacts, as we've been talking about today, but they also have major social impacts. So sand is one of the main materials in construction, and it has been used for millennia, but it really, its use really ramped up from the 20th century, and it is today an overexploited natural resource, as Hank from Saint-Gobain already mentioned today. And the current scarcity of sand, coupled with the efforts to regulate the sand mining industry, has really spawned an illegal trade. And we see today in some places where the demand for sand is so intense that organized criminal gangs have taken over the trade. And this has been playing major social implications and human rights risks. And the same for the overexploitation of forestry and logging, as timber is today more and more used in construction, where key human rights risks are related to workplace conditions, particularly to health and safety in the workplace, threats to livelihood and life due to significant use of resources, including land, water, and forest, and also impacts on existing transport networks and local infrastructure, but also indigenous people's rights. So shifting to a circular building and construction will have a definite impact on the supply chains. And it is important that we identify which countries, which communities, and which workforces can be adversely affected in the process. And poorer countries that rely mainly on extractive industries and have their economies firmly based on a linear model are the ones that can have more significant impacts if we don't create the right policies and strategies for their economies' diversification, but also for their reskilling of workers and better human safeguards. And these countries will need the support from the international community through targeted assistance programs if the international trade in established commodities and manufacturers declines in the medium and long term. But in order for us to develop the safeguards needed to support those at risk of being left behind means that when we design policy and support programs, we need to look first at different kinds of justice. So distributive justice. Who carries and who will carry the burden? Procedural justice, who is included and excluded from the decision-making process? And here I really wanted to elevate the importance of including all the stakeholders from the very early stages of the processes, and especially those communities adversely affected. Restorative justice, and very happy that Katrina already mentioned restoration today, because restorative justice is about allowing time. So not only for nature and the ecosystems to regenerate, but also from a social perspective in order to allow time to prevent conflict, to build relationships, and to repair harm. And finally, the recognition of rights. So who has the ownership rights to land and resources, for example? And the earlier we take all these considerations and the earlier we involve those interested parties in the process, the better chances for a positive and significant impact in our built environment. So the need to move towards a circular economy is undoubted. And we have the knowledge and the technology to do it, as we heard from today's presentations. We have finance rolling out for it, and we have the construction industry shifting more and more towards circular options. But now we also have the opportunity to do it in a just way. So IHRB Built Environment, in coalition with 3 other organizations, the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, the Rafto Foundation, and the Australian Human Rights Institute, have developed the framework for dignity by design, where we, similar to the circular perspective, we look into the built environment life cycle, from land acquisition to planning and finance, design, construction, and finally to renovation and demolition. And at each stage of the life cycle, we look at what are the potential human rights risks, and we really make a point in emphasizing how can we mitigate the human rights risks, but also how can we maximize the social outcomes for each project. And this can be applied to material as well. So for example, when we look at land acquisition, we can look at who has access and rights over land and the resources. And for example, when we look at the construction phase, we are looking at responsible source of materials. So where and how are we sourcing them? And this just as an example. And we acknowledge the ecosystem of actors in the built environment who need to drive change in this area, from legislation and procurement requirements at national and local levels to owners, architects, construction companies. It's quite complex, and harnessing the roles and leverage points of the different actors is crucial. And for materials, these leverage points can include regulatory frameworks, public procurement, as Jeff was just saying, procurement, project requirements, but also design decisions and product specifications, and really importantly, policy advocacy. So what am I saying in practice, and how have we been implementing this? So for the past 2.5 years, we've been working with the municipality of Bergen in Norway, and we've been developing a project pilot where our framework for dignity in the built environment has been used as a guiding tool to minimize social risks and maximizing social opportunities. So behind what I've just shown you sits a huge Excel sheet that for each stage of the construction life cycle has a set of guiding questions that are related to the relevant human rights standards and also the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as a series of practical examples. So if you're the owner, the developer, a community member, the design team, the architect, you can look at these guiding questions and really think what are the social risks here, and how can they be prevented and minimized. So for this specific project in Bergen, it encompassed the conversion of an old teachers' college into a new reception center for newly arrived immigrants and refugees to the city of Bergen. And the project involved not only the refurbishment of an old building, but it also had demolition and new construction. And in here, circularity played a prominent role. So by involving the future building users and the surrounding community, the reuse and recycling of materials took another dimension. So, for example, some of the social workers that will be working at Bergen's Inclusion Center were actually trained and educated at the old college. And for example, for them was really important to preserve some of the existing wood panels and some of the existing lamps, because for them it was important in order to keep the legacy and the history of the building. But also by involving the immigrant communities in the process, it helped the design team to rethink how better to design the spaces to cater to the different cultural and religious backgrounds. And this included, for example, creating different prayer spaces or communal spaces for gatherings and activities that would make women and young girls feel safer. And last but not least, it made the municipality, which in this case is the project developer, to really change their public procurement practices to ensure that human rights were safeguarded throughout the construction process. And they did this through tender documents and choice of contractors, and they also included requirements for more responsible business practice. So it is possible to do it in a fair way and in a social socially just way. And to finish, as Esther from CDL said earlier this morning, late afternoon for you, she said at her presentation that we need to bring all parts in the process in order to move the needle. And I really want to elevate the importance of doing so from the very early stages of the process. And I can say that one of our mantras at IHRB is really the earlier we involve all interested parties in the process, the better changes for a positive and significant impact, and the better opportunities to achieve a just transition in the built environment. So I'll finish here. Thank you so much. And please just reach out to us if you're interested or if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. This really a beautiful message, because whatever we're doing foolish with the climate action, with the resource and circularity, health and well-being, the most important things that we're doing for ourselves. And we really need to take care of ourselves in the beginning to really see what is the human right, what is the justice we're making forward. So thank you. And this is a very crucial and important message I really wanted to end in today's webinar. I'm sure that everyone has really walked away with a lot of important messages, but please remember this one, because you're doing everything for yourself, for our humankind, for families, and for everyone on Earth as well. Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Jai. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Right, so this marks the end of our Asia Pacific Festival Resource and Circularity webinar. So we also put in this next month, we will be having the World Green Building Council's World Green Building Week. And then just to follow through what Andrea has also shared with us, we are going to have the focus of hashtag sustainability building for everyone in our World Green Building Week. So follow us and also stay tuned with all the events and also the webinars organizing by our Green Building Councils all around the world. So in this way, thank you so much everyone for joining us, and we will catch up after this. Bye-bye.